Welcome back to the show, everyone.
Right.
We've had some fun, and we're joined by two great new guests, so let's first introduce them. First we have...
You.
Me.
Yes.
Yeah, damn right you got me.
Yeah, damn right. And
What's your
tell
name?
everyone who you are and what you do.
I was hoping you would introduce me.
This is Lars. I like him already.
All right, good.
That's all you need to know.
All right.
Wait, you didn't
He
like him
does-
when you invited him?
Yeah. He does stuff
God.
for the Austin Film Society. And we
hold
were
against
originally
him.
going to have him on our first show, but he gets really busy, so we're lucky we got him out here now.
Yeah, I've been getting busy.
But could you tell me you do screenings on Thursdays?
I just screen a lot of days. Do a lot of screenings, yeah.
I thought someone from the Austin Film Society who watches movies and has such a love of movies as
Yeah.
he has would be good to come out. And we have a new friend.
My name is Tim Neal, and I have no qualifications whatsoever. I just watch way too many movies.
Thus you're qualified.
To say the least, because we were playing a game called Popcorn Time, and he has to have a handicap because he can name everything that comes out of this game in like 2 seconds flat. It was quite a feat. So what we want to talk about today is the art of film, because film is something everybody loves. That's I think that's everyone's go-to media for entertainment and to just an escapism. And when I look at film, and I decided I want to talk about this, I looked at how it started, where going to the movies was like a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, they took their time with the movies and they put effort into it, and they made really good movies. And as it started becoming more mainstream with technology, they will literally throw anything on film now and just release it. And so kind of going to the movies now isn't quite as an experience, except for those epic ones like Avengers or Lord of the Rings or something. And it seems to me that it's been watered down a little bit and become a disposable media.
I'm glad that you think that a lot of films in the past took like a long time to film.
Well, I'm
That
not saying it
amuses
took
me.
a long time to film. There was more effort and thought put into it because not everyone went to the movies every weekend. Not everyone had Netflix. Not everyone had, torrents where they could download whatever they wanted.
Yeah, to use a movie reference, it's like Coneheads. It's mass consumption right now of movies.
So I'm going to start with Lars because he was like, I disagree with you 100%. So let's hear it.
Well, okay, I'm not sure the thesis has been fully stated for me to disagree with, but I will make a point or two, which is that film has always been American film. I will say this. So let's not speak about German film or something, or French film, or films from other cultures that have sometimes had have originated primarily with like art funding from maybe governments or for cultural foundations.
Yeah.
But in America, it's always been about commerce, and there's always been a tension between commerce and art. It's easy to look back and say, oh well, films were all so well made. Well, the films that we might watch from 1941 are going to be films that have been more or less vetted through strained through the process of history and critical review over all these years. But there were an awful lot of pretty bad movies made during that time. I mean, bad, crass movies. But a lot of the tension, I think that the art form that's most analogous to film is architecture. Believe it or not, in terms of the way it works. Simply because if I want to be an architect, I gotta figure out how to get these guys that can buy, these 100-foot blocks of granite who are gonna work with me on this. So I may consider myself an artist, and I can be an artist as much as I like in my sketchbook, on my papers. But in terms of actually building buildings, I'm gonna have to collaborate with some heavy dudes with a lot of money, And so that's sort of the nature of film and how film has existed. Is like you can be an artist in film, but you're gonna have to collaborate with these guys with all the money. And I think where that sort of imbalance, if we'll say there's an imbalance now, it's that, let's say in 1932, those guys who had the money, they were probably almost as crass as the guys who are looking to make money now. But those guys had to rely on these creative dudes who had, were maybe, let's say they were pure of heart, they were pure artists. And so a deal had to be made, a rapprochement, if you will, had to be made between art and commerce. And I think that what's happened is that the people who are pure at heart and artists, you wouldn't say that those people can't exist very well in the climate, almost as like a freshwater fish that can't exist in the saltwater of Hollywood, where the budgets have become so much greater. But at the same time, I'm sorry, I'm giving a monologue here.
No.
But at the same time, it's like I do think that we are living in a period of cultural decadence and a period of artistic decadence, but at the same time, a thing happens always. Like, if you were to say, where is the best music happening? Is better music that's going to have more lasting value happening on SoundCloud, or is it being released by Sony Records? And I think that you would say, oh, SoundCloud is actually the place to be looking right now for interesting music. And I think the same thing's true with film, because we can all make films that look pretty great. I've just been judging the short film showcase of people who made movies for $200, and they can look amazing. Just the quality of cameras, like these cameras the quality would have been out of reach years ago. And so people can get these cameras, they can torrent and download and steal all the software they need to make things, and it's a different proposition now for making films. And I have a couple of friends who make films, and they don't even care if anybody ever buys a ticket to them. They'll use whatever music. If they want to use Gimme Shelter in their movie, they'll use Gimme Shelter. They won't even worry about clearing the rights for it, because there's no commercial end game for films. So really interesting things are happening right now with films that exist outside the world of commerciality. And then commercial films become, this will be a disputed topic, but kind of worse and worse, I think.
What about you, Tim?
See, I kind of disagree a little bit with some of that assessment. I'd like to point out that I think you overstate a little bit how big a deal the movies were when they first came out. Movies have always been sort of this egalitarian form of entertainment, especially when they were first being developed. They were the cheaper alternative to things like the theater or the opera or the symphony, the other like pastimes that families would go to and enjoy themselves. And I think because of that egalitarian nature, they've sort of always been considered kind of a low art form. And I would argue that, like, as we've gone on, more and more movies are probably right now at their peak in terms of prestige associated with them. And I think a lot of that is sort of, like you said, the survivorship bias, I'll call it, of the good movies, the weeding out of the bad ones, and kind of smart people taking advantage of the lessons that those movies taught and kind of marching forward and innovating and advancing. I think that goes true for both independent films and like mass studio commercial films. We just had the Oscars, and there were, big hit movies in there that are also generally regarded to be like great films. The Revenant made hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office, was number one for several weeks. Like, I think I think it's just, like, everybody says, oh, music was its best in the 70s. The 70s was when they were making real music. No, the stuff that's on the radio today from the 70s is great. But if you go back and look at the Billboard Top 40 charts from 1976 or whatever, there was just as much schlock as there is on the radio today. So I think movies are kind of a similar thing. And I would argue that right now, I think we're living in kind of a peak age for great films.
You two have anything you want to add to this?
I do. One of my things is, to me, in a mainstream.
We'll get to you. Hold on.
I feel like almost like, and I'll give my time to him now. No kidding. To me, though, in my opinion, with mainstream studios, you either have one of two movies. You either have your Hollywood blockbuster, your Guardians of the Galaxy, your Jurassic Worlds, your super big billions of dollars.
I love those movies.
Right.
I love explosions, and the bigger spectacle, the better.
Like Michael Bay.
And then your second movie is your Oscar bait. Your Book Thief, your Schindler's List, your Bridge of Spies, your Revenant. These, even though they make lots of money, these movies are literally designed for, we want to give Leonardo DiCaprio or Tom Hanks another Oscar, or an Oscar in the first time. And for the mainstream movies, that's all there is. It seems like either you have the big spectacle, or you have the thing that's literally made to get an Oscar.
I think I'm the opposite of the spectrum. Like, I like movies, don't get me wrong, but very rarely will I actually shell out like $10 on average to go and buy a ticket and sit in a crowd with strangers that may throw popcorn or have a crying baby. I would rather wait.
It's called the Draft House. You might want to invest into it.
Or AFS.
Or Oscar Society.
Right. But like every time I go, I seem to have a bad experience unless it's like way after the release. Like I went and seen Deadpool pretty much as it came out, like right before Valentine's Day, and thankfully it was just at a theater in Cedar Park where there was not a lot of people going to. So I had a pretty good experience. We got there early, got the good seats, and we had a good time. But most films, I can sit there and just I'll wait for it to come out in Blu-ray. I'll be okay. Maybe Netflix will get it. I'm all right with that. I'm not in a huge rush to go out to a
See, I
theater
think a
because
lot
me
of
it's an
people are
event.
getting to that point now because it's a little ridiculous, and you remakes after remakes, reboots after reboots. Let's let him have his say since he was biting his hand. I don't want him to eat his
Oh
arm
no!
off
I mean,
here.
I think we could drum up a miniature sort of culture clash here. You've brought me here to talk about this stuff, and I feel like I've never seen a Marvel movie all the way through. I've walked out of a couple, but I've never seen one all the way through. I haven't watched Star Wars, all stuff like that. So
No Star Wars?
I haven't seen it either.
no, I saw the first one when it came out, and I saw the first three when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But the first, I didn't have
Those are
any.
two that really count. So
Yeah, but I
You're
mean,
correct.
like the new one came out, and I think that I'm probably coming from a completely different place. So that when my colleague to the east here says that that there are two kinds of movies, I
For the
realize
mainstream
that
for the mainstream
for
series.
mainstreams, yeah, and you're saying that there's either Oscar bait but at this point in our lives, why are we restricting ourselves to mainstream cinema? It's not. We live in Austin, man. It's like if we lived in like some awful place like Tulsa or something, then then we would have if we wanted to experience cinema as cinema, big, then
Yeah.
we have mainstream movies, but we live in Austin for a lot of reasons. And part of that reason is that we're not restricted to only watching, Joe, we Russ at the Call, who made Uncle Boonmee, has a new movie coming out, Cemetery of Splendor, and we can go see that on the big screen, man. That's really exciting for us. The Arabian Nights, Miguel Gomez Arabian Nights trilogy is coming out. We're going to see that on the big screen. So I think that when we say, and I realize, we're having a conversation, but I think that when you make the point that these are the two kinds of movies, we're talking about a really degraded segment of film, which is Hollywood. And I believe, now I have a thesis I can disagree with, but I believe that in fact we are in a period of intense decadence in Hollywood. Hollywood movies are especially bad, and I think that historically, 20 years down the line, when we can actually, Andrew Sayers said we're too close to our own time to judge our films. But I think 20 years from now, people will look at these films and go, oh my God, of course Trump became president. Of course the civilization crumbled. Of course the economy crumbled. Of course this civilization, fell into an abyss like Rome at the end. When we look at a thing like Deadpool or something like that, it will become really obvious that, oh yeah, duh, that culture was decadent. It was at the end, and it had lost its sense of roots. It had lost its sense of fineness, even in commercial art.
But hold on.
You put it right. Decadence is how I was trying to get to. There's something missing from films today that even on our list, like you brought it up, most of our unremakeable movies were older movies. And it's not just because of a nostalgia factor, it's because of the way they were made. And things that were made as part of their time, especially, are just great in their time, but some things, go past that time. But I also think the biggest problem is we live in a world where no one has any spare time. So they're only used to, let's go to the movie theater, what's playing on all the big screens, what do we see the most commercials for, what do we see the most on Facebook and Twitter and all the social media. And I think that's taking away from the actual movie experience of good movies. Because one of the things we love on these film festivals is we purposely go see the things that we wouldn't normally do. We focus on the documentaries, the shorts. We don't do the big things. We go see things that we wouldn't normally go see on a regular basis, and we discover some of the most amazing films that way. But most people don't have that luxury. They don't have that time in their life.
You're a scholar. Would you say that and I'm always interested in that segment of geek culture, if you will, which I hate the term, but of geek culture that is geek scholarship.
Geek culture.
It's a nose ring. It's a marketing term. It's a way to sell to people who are intensely gullible. But there is geek culture, and I also think that there's a segment of geek culture that is geek scholarship, in a way.
Yeah.
And that's the people I've always enjoyed. It's like, oh, you're really interested in this one thing, in this musician, or in these films. Tell me more about it. You who have studied this. But then there's sort of the geek culture, which is like, oh yeah, it makes. I'm sorry, I'm going to rag on Deadpool again, but it makes Deadpool this huge hit, because people can be led by
exactly what it needed to be.
It's like a Seth MacFarlane type,
But that's the character.
Yeah, exactly. That stuff's very popular, but it's also really lame. You know what I mean? It's
that's the problem with the Deadpool is that was made for a very specific market that all these people want to go see and didn't
Reddit.
really get it.
Well,
Reddit movie.
And I mean, and the thing about Deadpool, and picking up on y'all's 2 points, is I do agree, especially Hollywood, has that very binary like feel to it because of what you were saying. Like, you need to give people a reason to go out to the movies. So it's either this is a big spectacle that only I can see on the big screen, or like the Oscar bait, I need to see this before the Oscars so I can be informed at my watching party and all that. The thing where that ties into Deadpool is kind of what passes for like a middle tier movie now, because it only costs like 70 million instead of 100 or whatever. I mean, for me, like, one of the biggest blind spots in movies today, and I was and am very positive on movies today, but I will say one of the big blind spots for me is just the $30-40 million heist movie or cop movie or something like that. You know, something that's not, you know, not an event, not a big thing, but I mean, you know, it produced movies like The Sting in the 70s, which is one of my all-time favorites. Like, I think there is sort of a market inefficiency there for, like, you know, a small-ish, cheap-ish for Hollywood, like, movie, but that can, you know, just deliver a good performance, get word of mouth, turn a profit, and maybe make a pretty decent movie out of the course.
I think one of the things that's... You said, by the way, that we are at an age of decadence with movies, and I have to remember Ben-Hur and Cleopatra, which had set budgets greater than what they were paying the entire acting cast combined.
Elizabeth Taylor's on-set needs on Cleopatra probably would have bankrupted most studios today.
Movies we still watch.
Right,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, we're still watching 1978, 77 was when Star Wars came out, and they're still literally showing that almost like once a month at some channel. But the idea of decadence being bad, Hollywood has been nothing but decadence literally since day one, when they bought an orange farm to turn into a movie studio, which is how Hollywoodland started.
I should clarify my term. Decadence, I mean social decadence. I mean artistic and social decadence, not decadence in not delicious decadence.
But even then still, half those religious movies, Ben-Hur and all those, was made to show how Hollywood understands that the religious folk want a movie that represents them. And they did that in spades. And then now in this era where the geek culture and all the nerds have grown up and have money and excess cash and they want to take their kids things, now it's feeding those. Just
Pocky,
like back
who
in
has
the
excess cash, especially if you have kids.
Sure. But what I'm saying is the children of the 80s are now a viable market. Those kids who grew up on that now need to have their fills needed. Just like all the kids who grew up on Westerns needed to have that niche filled. That's where all the spaghetti Westerns come from and all those Westerns.
Yeah, but the problem when you cater to such a specific market is we get Jim and the Holograms.
Right, and it failed. Just like right now, Gods of Egypt is failing. That was a $140 million bomb.
It just looks horrible.
Because they're literally just taking anything and everything and not really putting too much thought behind it. That's how I see it.
It's misunderstanding their markets,
Yeah.
and that's Gem and the Holograms. I'm sure was an expensive film. The films you're talking about, heist movies, they're what are called pipeline fillers. They've got the Hollywood studios have a distribution pipeline. They have to fill those, and that's where so many good movies, like even like Jaws, which of course its budget ballooned and all that, but it was it was to be a pipeline filler because they had to deliver a certain number of movies along a certain number of lines, and that creates opportunities, I think. So Gem and the Holograms failed, you know, but it was like, what was it, maybe $30 million, like a low budget movie?
I think it was like $20 million.
No,
very
It
low
was
budget
low,
movie.
low.
Like
No,
Lionsgate
it wasn't.
budget.
That was a $75 million budget.
Oh,
Can you see where it was on the screen? Because no one else can.
But this is stuff that, I mean, it just seems ridiculous that I don't think they would have tried to pull too long ago.
Do you know what I actually think? I don't even think it's the movie's fault at this point.
I think it's like a producers. They just kind of pocketed all that money. And
I don't even think it's
But
them.
we got to
It was a
pay
huge
scam.
Well, no, I don't even
Well, I
think
mean,
it's them.
studios have been ripping the talent off on the back end forever.
Oh my
now.
God, you're so right.
Selznick was ripping off
yeah.
talent. Like,
but he was making good movies,
Right.
so it's kind of worth it. You know?
But I think the true villain in Hollywood, if we want to have the ultimate villain in Hollywood, I think it's the marketing department. I think it's the fact that someone went to the studio and goes, look, 80s cartoons are big right now. We have the rights to the Mattel toy line. There was Jim and the Holograms, because they already started having toys for these things even before they started announcing the movie and how crappy the cast was. That they started. Marketing departments are now dictating. They've been dictating forever thing. Like when Star Trek 2 or 3, when they blew up the Enterprise. And
That's like every Star Trek.
No, and in the original 3, Leonard Nimoy didn't want the starship blowing up. be in the trailers. The marketing department goes, no, we can get butts in a seat if we show the Enterprise going down in a ball of flame. And Leonard Nimoy and all the actors in the crews fought like hell to stop that from being shown, and they did it anyway. And it ruined the big surprise at the end of the movie.
So here's a question for you guys.
No.
As we're getting to this point of oversaturation and overdecadence, what's going to happen when that bubble pops? Do you think it's going to pop and we're going to end up going backwards to maybe slowing down the movie releases?
No, I mean, I think it's a symptom of cultural decadence across the board. So our culture's getting dumber. Our education system is intentionally
We are very much
bad.
in idiocracy territory.
We really are. I mean, we really are. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of not. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to get dumber, and movies are going to continue to be dumber. But the great thing is, we're this country, pretty big country, but there's all these other countries where many of them where good things are still going to happen, maybe for 20 or 30 more years before they all go bad. Which is, I mean, as a planet, maybe we have 60 or 70 more years before we're consumed by the affiliated wars that go along with global warming and so forth. So maybe we might have 20 more years of good movies that come from places like Indonesia, possibly, or from places like, I don't know, like Siberia, God knows. There might be like good movies coming from someplace. So, I mean, I think we're at the end of human civilization on the Earth, more or less. So for us to kind of rattle on about how bad movies are getting in a way is kind of silly, but we're the species most equipped to be silly. Maybe the only species that's equipped to be silly, except for the platypus
And the monkeys.
And the
monkeys
dolphin.
also. Our close relatives, the monkeys. But yeah, so I do think that everything's going to get worse, and then eventually we're going to burn up into little cinders.
Kim?
And to that point, the spaghetti westerns you mentioned earlier from Italy originally, and then so those weren't Hollywood made. I mean, I think if this bubble isn't sustainable, which it very well may not be, and if it is going to pop, I think you're going to see a lot of the talented people do what they've already started to do, take their talents to television, take their talents to streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, just sort of try to cut out sort of this distributorship network that I think is kind of partially responsible for sort of the decadence that we've been talking about, because like I said, everything you needs to be big so you have a reason to go see it. Whereas, like you said, if you can just bring in a smaller story to Netflix and it's right there on your couch, there's more room for kind of a middle tier level of decadence, I guess would be how I'd put it.
And that, my friend, is the darkest thing I've heard all day, because that is the end of cinema. Because watching a movie on television is not cinema.
I don't disagree.
And when we watch these quasi-cinematic shows, like, I don't know, True Detective or whatever, shows that are quasi-cinematic, they approximate the experience of watching films on television, but they're not cinema. They're phony cinema, and they're sort of a postage stamp representation of cinema. Even if my TV's this big, right. It's not cinema.
Right.
Kim, what do you think about that? Because you watch most of the things at the house.
Oh yeah. The funny thing is, like, I don't watch a lot of the stuff from Hollywood. Like, most of what I watch is going to be like films from Japan or films from China or films from like random countries around the world. I don't subscribe mainly to what Hollywood tries to shove down my throat. I might go out and see one. I might rent one. I might buy it. But mainly, I'm watching something that looks interesting. And to the point of the movie Apocalypse that we're kind of aiming towards, like, what happens? I think we as a society will just simply burn out. We'll like go, you know what? I've seen this a billion times. It's that same movie, only you've changed the guy, made him blue instead of red. It's done. And then we'll start to go, well, what else can we watch? Well, what about those independent stuff? We haven't really seen that as a mass society. So why don't we try to consume something like that instead? I think what we want will simply change.
And I'll be right there waiting with the independent films. When people come to me, they'll be coming to say, "Oh, do you have any water?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I got water." And they'll be like, "Do you have any independent films?" I'm like, "Yeah, here we go."
Get there in the back. Come on.
Austin Film Society will be there with the independent films.
I think I like this talk of the apocalypse. This makes me amused.
All right.
Mostly, hold on.
We're almost out of time, so
I
we
know.
gotta wrap this up. Be quick.
So my thing is I love people who tell me about the end of the world, because I have literally heard about the end of the world since 1901, when I first read about the Carolina.
You weren't alive in
When I was
1901.
like, wait a
Shush.
minute,
Hold on.
vampire?
Yes, over here. So in 1901, there was the Carolina end of the world cult. Literally, in North Carolina, this cult, these people said the end of the world was going to happen in 1901.
My home state.
Right. Guess what? I'm still standing here. I'm standing right here, and the end of the world did happen.
All those tabloids do it every week. So, before we go, because we only have a couple minutes left, I want to ask you a question.
Millisecond in historical time.
Not even that.
What is the worst movie you've ever seen?
Geez. I really wish I had prepared an answer for this. I don't know. It would be something. I don't know. Mom and Dad Save the World. Mom and Dad Save the World.
That's pretty bad. The Prey.
Best/worst would be the City Hunter live action movie. With
City
Jackie Chan as
Hunter.
Chun-Li.
I love that movie.
Best/worst.
This is my own bias. I really hate musicals, but I got dragged to Phantom of the Opera when I was trying to date this girl in high school. And
Okay, you can go away now. I love it. Anyway, so mine would have to be a Serbian film because someone had to create newborn porn noise. I am sorry, that's on someone's resume. I always follow those lists, movies not to watch with people, and I'll go watch them all. And be like, okay, that's why you don't watch it with people. He knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. No, I met the guys that made that film in Eastern Europe.
Did you ask him what the hell was wrong with him?
No, they were real nice guys actually. They were like super sweet, friendly guys.
It's always the unassuming one.
Until the door shuts.
I have a boba fetish. Let's go.
Oh.
I have our shirt. I need to get you that shirt too. It says I have
What's
a
that?
Boba
What's
fetish.
that? Oh.
It's only because we haven't done that yet.